Hi, this is Dr. Justin Marchegiani here, and today's talk is going to be on gluten and Hashimoto's, or Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. And yes, there is a connection. So I have a Hashimoto condition myself for the last 5 or 6 years when I diagnosed myself, and I am very sensitive to gluten. When I have gluten exposure, all kinds of things in my world go wrong, so to speak. And the scientific literature really supports this. They find that literally when you're eating gluten, you're increasing your thyroid antibodies. And they also find that reaction can literally last up to 6 months. So they've given people gluten and they've tested their blood, and at the 6-month points where they found a lot of those antibodies for gluten finally dropped off. So this is really important because if you're just thinking that, oh, 80-20, 2 days a week I can have some gluten exposure even though I have Hashis, no big deal. Well, no, it's really a big deal. You may not ever get better. And I always tell my patients to visualize a piece of their thyroid tissue getting burnt up and never getting it back. And the scar tissue or the fibrotic tissue starts to form, and then that part of the thyroid gland becomes spongy and it's not functional. It's no more, it loses the ability to produce thyroid hormone adequately. And then at some point you may even be dependent upon thyroid medication. So let's take a look and see what's happening here. So over time, thyroid antibody levels go up, especially if you have various infections like Lyme, Yersinia, H. pylori, or Epstein-Barr. That's another video for another day. But again, when these antibodies rise, but today, one of the things that would make it rise would be gluten exposure. So if we're getting exposure to gluten, we're going to see increased antibodies over time. And typically, it takes about 10 years for the gland to be fatigued. So if we have this reaction here, these antibodies, again, they're positive when we get over 36 on your typical LabCorp blood work. But if we keep these antibodies going and we're continuing to eat gluten and we're getting stressed out, maybe exposure to various infections, and we have blood sugar swings and adrenal fatigue, we're going to continue to increase thyroid antibody production. And what you're going to see below here, our thyroid function actually drops. So you can see the bigger thyroid gland is just a symbolic for a healthier thyroid gland. And you can see these little bits here. These are thyroid hormone. That's thyroid hormone. I'll put TH there. And this is spilling out of the thyroid gland. This is important. When people start having Hashimoto's early on, and especially if it's triggered by gluten, you may almost feel like you're having hyper-like symptoms. Anxiety, higher pulse, tachycardia, maybe an extra sweating, things like that. But again, what's happening in the beginning is that you're just spilling out thyroid hormone. And as it gets worse, you spill out more thyroid hormone and more. But over time, the gland is losing functioning. So in the end, you're typically always going to end up in a hypo state when you're dealing with autoimmune thyroid issue. It's just a matter of times. Sometimes maybe 1% of the people will start out in the grave state where they're making certain antibodies that will stimulate the thyroid, but most people in the beginning, they're going to have hyper symptoms, even if it's a Hashimoto, which is an autoimmune hypothyroid. The reason why it's hypo is in the end, you're going to get to this place. That's the key right there. But again, if we do a couple of things, if we stop with the gluten exposure, that can drastically start to drop the antibodies. That's a good thing. So let's look at the mechanism of what's happening here. So here's your gut. This is inside of your intestinal tract. We have these various microvilli. They're in our small intestine. They're finger-like projections, and they absorb nutrition just like a vacuum cleaner would suck up dirt. So typically, let's say here we put maybe your vitamin C, maybe selenium, maybe some iron, and typically these things get sucked right up into the villi and they go right into your bloodstream. But over here, these little black channels, this is a sign of a leaky gut. That's what my drawing is symbolic for. So what happens is we have undigested particles here, these little red dots. These are undigested particles of gluten. And again, these particles aren't fully broken down, so they're sitting in our intestinal tract here, just like this. Our body can't break them down fully, and eventually it goes right out through our tight junctions into our bloodstream. And our immune system is not used to seeing undigested gluten particles just like this in our bloodstream. So it starts freaking out. It starts making antibodies. Some of these antibodies are from B cells. So these B guys down here, these are essentially going to be creating a lot of the antibodies, and they're going to be attacking the gluten, just like so. The problem is the gluten molecule also looks kind of similar to the thyroid molecules over here. So the B cells actually start coming in and attacking the thyroid gland as well. And again, we start getting more and more antibody production, and we start getting more loss of function. The scar tissue, that spongy tissue, starts taking over, and we lose the ability to have healthy thyroid function, i.e. healthy thyroid hormone. And we need healthy thyroid hormone for brain function, for gut motility, for healthy bones, and every single cell in our body metabolically runs off of thyroid hormone. It's the fuel. It helps break down a lot of the cholesterol and our hormone constituents so we can make all the hormones in our body. So we don't want to be without thyroid hormone, but most people have this devastating autoimmune condition. And again, a big trigger, the key here is really the gluten. The gluten is a really big trigger. So if we can get that out of your diet, that's going to make a big difference. But it's the gluten that's driving the leaky gut here, that's continuing to raise the thyroid antibodies. Again, the gluten is creating these various B cells are produced from our immune system. Our immune system starts attacking the gluten, but also starts attacking the thyroid gland as well. Hope this video was helpful. Again, feel free and check out below the video for more information on how you can get a hold of me and my various newsletters and YouTube channels. Again, there'll be more great information coming soon about how you can master your thyroid. Thanks. This is Dr. Justin signing off.